Hey guys, Alex from 7th Hour Films, and today I'm starting something new here on Saturdays. I'm going to be doing a manga review. Yeah, isn't that interesting? So, as you guys know, or I would assume you know, I do a lot of anime reactions here on the channel. Currently, I am doing Attack on Titan, My Hero Academia, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and One Punch Man. But I wanted to do more, I suppose. So, I thought, you know what? Why don't I do some manga reviews? Now, this is not a reaction. Let me start off there. Because how do you react to a manga? I feel like that'd be very, very strange. But I am going to be reviewing the manga. So if you've seen some of my other reviews, then you pretty much know how this goes. I'm just going to be sitting here and I'm going to be talking to you about manga, basically. So, yeah. Today, I am reviewing the first 20 chapters of the Yu-Gi-Oh manga. Now, I've been a fan of Yu-Gi-Oh for years. Years and years and years. And I've always been a fan of the anime. Well, most of the anime, I should say. And the thing is, I have read a bit of the manga technically, because I've actually already reviewed Yu-Gi-Oh! R, which is a sort of in-between story between Battle City and I believe the Millennium World arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! And you can go find that review here on the channel. It's a bit of an old review, but it checks out. And so I've never actually watched the Season 0 anime or read the original chapters. I've only watched basically from Duelist Kingdom on. And so I decided, you know what, for my first manga review, I'm going to be reviewing the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Chapters. And so basically before the Duelist Kingdom arc, there's about 59 chapters. Today we're going to be doing the first 20, basically. Now, for this review, I obviously read all 20 chapters and I took notes. We're not going to be going point by point because that'll take forever, basically. But we are going to be highlighting specific moments that I really liked and stood out to me, especially the shadow games of each chapter. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and get started. We are on Chapter 1, first off, The Puzzle of the Gods. Also, hopefully you've read the manga. If not, I will go ahead and say spoiler alert for the manga. If you have not read the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, you should. It's pretty easy, actually, to get. You can read, I believe the first 3 chapters are free to read on Viz Media. You may be able to find them elsewhere. Also, you could probably just buy a volume. I've actually subscribed to Viz Media so that I can read a bunch of manga. So, yeah, you can do that. But let's go ahead and get into Chapter 1, The Puzzle of the Gods. So this one is obviously the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Story. It's pretty simple. This is the one where basically Yugi is trying to solve the Millennium Puzzle, and a piece of it is stolen by Jonochi, the bully. I may or may not stick with the names in the manga at all times because I am so used to the English dub of the anime. If I say Joey, Tristan, or Taya at any point, then I'm sorry about that, but I will try to stick with the names that are presented in the manga. Also, I don't know if it's manga or manga, so you guys can tell me. I've heard it both ways, so manga, manga, mangoes, we'll just figure that out as we go. So yeah. So Yugi's trying to complete the Millennium Puzzle, but a piece of it is stolen by the bully Jonochi and is thrown away. So for a couple quick notes, actually this is the chapter I took the most notes on. So a couple things that we have here. Jonochi and Honda, Joey and Tristan if you're used to the English dub. Jonochi and Honda are bullies, which is interesting. Honda actually, he sort of gets sidelined, as we'll come to see here. And then obviously we have Yugi's friend Anzu, Taya, if you watch the English dub, and I'll try again to keep to their original names. We have Anzu, who's sort of the one friend who stands up to Jonochi and Honda. There was a Dragon Ball reference early on. Yugi was saying that basically if you assemble the Millennium Puzzle, a wish is granted. He's like, oh, just like the Dragon Balls. So that was kind of weird, actually, to see that. So we also get the the kind of other bully, Ushio. Ushio, the top dog. They basically say he's like he's a very stern hall monitor, basically, and he's against bullying. So what does he do to bullies? He beats them up. That's great. That's really just great. He beats up Jonochi and Honda, and Yugi's like, oh no, they're my friends, which is interesting. You know, he pretty much doesn't harbor any ill will against them. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. And then it's like, oh, well, you're going to have to pay me 200,000 yen in order for me to keep beating them up. I explained that horribly. But yeah, basically, Yugi owes him about 200,000 yen, and he gets beaten up as well. But he is able to complete the Millennium Puzzle and bring out Dark Yugi, also known as Yami Yugi. That's when we get our first shadow game, The Knife. Okay, now this one was kind of freaky. A lot of them, actually, I found with the shadow games, they're kind of weird. They're not exactly games, per se. But this one is basically Yugi and Ushio take turns with the 400,000 yen on their hands. And they take Ushio's knife and they stab down. And whatever the knife holds on to, they keep. But the thing is, you have to be careful, because if you really try to stab down, you do run the risk of stabbing through your own hand, which is strange. And what's revealed is that a person's true nature comes out in a shadow game, and because of that, Ushio basically can't stop himself. He wants to stop himself from going full force, but he can't. But then he tries basically to stab Yugi, which is interesting. And I think, well, that obviously he's cheating, so he brings about the first penalty game, where he believes that a bunch of leaves and dirt are money. Kind of weird. Honestly, for the first shadow game and the first penalty game, it's very, very strange. So, but the result of this is that Jonochi, which, wow, I put Joey in my notes. I'm sorry about that. But Jonochi is now friends with Yugi and, by extension, Anzu. But Honda ate. I mean, basically, after Honda gets beaten the crap out of, he actually doesn't show up for a while. Let's move on to Chapter 2. Again, we're going to be sort of rapid-firing these because of how many we have to get through. Let's go ahead. Just the basic plot of Chapter 2 is there's this film crew there to basically film a documentary about bullying, but in order to get footage of a kid being beaten up, they send in like the assistant director to beat up Yugi. So yeah, and I don't know why I wrote Omae wa mo shinderu, but I did. So it was something important. I can tell. Something interesting is, like I said, I grew up with Yu-Gi-Oh, and because of that, I grew up with the English dub of Yu-Gi-Oh, and man, the English 4Kids dub of Yu-Gi-Oh, that was back when anime was censored. We got to protect the children and stuff, and no one was better at that than 4Kids. And so going back to the original chapters of Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of a trip, because basically Jonochi gives Yugi a straight up porn on a VHS tape. Like, here you go, you little pervert. And Yugi's all like happy about it. It's like, well, this would never fly. Of course, like a lot of this stuff here, like, let's stab our hands and let's beat up a kid. This would never have flown. But that's why Season 0 was, never dubbed. I wish they could do that now, but obviously 4Kids wouldn't. But if Funimation could, just get all the voice actors back, especially Dan Green. You got to get him back. Basically, okay, so what exactly brought out the spirit in this one? I guess it was when... So, Jonochi tries to defend Yugi, but he ends up getting beaten up by the director, and that's what brings out the spirit. It's very interesting to see what brings out the spirit of the puzzle, or Dark Yugi, basically. So, and if I go back and forth between the spirit, Dark Yugi, Yami Yugi, you understand what I mean. So, for this one, Shadow Game number 2 is the roll of the dice. So, basically, whoever gets the lower dice roll die roll. It's only one die. Whoever gets the lower number wins. And Yugi even says, like, look, if it's a tie, then I'll let you win. And so Yugi rolls the die, and it lands on 6. And the guy's thinking, oh, well, then no matter what, it'll always be, I will win no matter what. And he rolls it, and somehow it splits in half so that it's 2 sides, 6 and 1, meaning 7. Which is stupid, because that's not how you win, like, at all. Like, I'm going to go back real quick, and I'm going to see, was there anything specific? No, I don't even think... No, it just happened. Like, they don't show, like, Yugi... they don't show Yugi, like, using his magic in order to split it. It's like, no, it just happened to split, which is the interesting thing. You would honestly think, because of these shadow games, that there would be some sort of magical advantage to Yugi, but there honestly isn't, So on this one, it just happened that it split and became a 7, So it's really ridiculous. Penalty game number 2 is Mosaic, where Yugi basically censors the guy's eyes so he only sees, like the pixelated, like when they pixelate a guy's face on the news, and he only can see that. So it's kind of weird. A lot of these are very strange. And speaking of strange, we are moving on to Chapter 3, Hard Beat. In this one, there's a really bad singer who bullies people. Okay, he bullies people and forces them to go to his, I guess, karaoke or just his performances. But he is such a god-awful singer, and he asks Yugi to sell 10 tickets, basically, to his performance. And then, while trying to sell the tickets, Yugi finds Hanasaki, who is also trying to sell 5 tickets himself. And so Yugi takes all the tickets, and then he just decides to go alone. He sold none of the tickets, so he went alone. He starts getting beaten up, but then the guy realizes, Sozoji. Sozoji realizes that Hanasaki didn't sell any of the tickets, so he beats him up. That brings out Dark Yugi, and then they have the next shadow game. It's very stupid. A lot of these really early ones are actually really stupid. They're fun. I like them, but they're really stupid. So shadow game number 3 is basically the quiet game. And there are these 2 clown microphone things. And if you make any sort of sound, then the clowns will start to move. And whoever makes a noise loses, basically. But what the guy doesn't realize is that he has his microphone up to his chest, and it's on max, and that, he doesn't realize, is amplifying his heartbeat, and that makes the clown thing move. And so he loses. Again, dumb as hell, but I do kind of like it. I love how serious it is, honestly. Like, these chapters, even as ridiculous as they are, they do also take themselves very, very seriously, So penalty game number 3 is a Loud Heart. I think it was like, he basically hears his heartbeat exponentially in his ears forever. Chapter 4 is called Jailbreak. This one was actually a bit more of an interesting one, where we have Anzu is basically trying to hide the fact that she has a job, which actually, apparently after school jobs are like not allowed. You can be expelled for having a job after school. Which is weird. You would think they wouldn't care about that, but whatever. They'll also bring up another rule like that in a later chapter. But so Anzu is basically hiding a job, and Yugi and Jonochi are trying to be like, okay, well, maybe what is it? And Jonochi's like, well, I'm probably doing a dub voice, but whatever. It's like, well, maybe she's like a teenage escort, basically, escort service, that's what it was called, where basically, young girls are paid to go on dates with older men. But Yugi is fully against that. And then they realize she just works at Burger World, and she's trying to save money to be a dancer in New York. So, yeah. They also mention, because, originally they go to Burger World, and Anzu sort of shoots that down. It's like, no, don't go there. And it's like, oh, we could go to Calorie Burger instead. It's like, what are these names? Like, these names sound like you're not trying, I don't mean that in a bad way. It's like, oh, I need another burger name. I don't know, calorie burger. So anyway, there's a serial killer on the loose, and he goes in, takes Anzu hostage, and during this hostage situation, he has the guy has Anzu blindfolded, and Jonochi is actually stuck behind a really fat guy, and neither of them can see what Yugi is about to do with his shadow game, basically. Shadow game number 4 is recoil, basically, where you pick a finger, and then you only use that finger. The guy chooses his trigger finger, and with his gun aimed at Yugi. Yugi chooses his thumb, lights a match, it drops there as he's pouring Russian vodka. If he shoots Yugi, he will end up burning alive. That's exactly what he does. Penalty game number 4 is actually just burning to death. So, and this is where we get Anzu's crush on the mysterious man that saved her. So, yeah. Moving on, chapter 5. This one is called The False Prophet. This is where there's a guy who makes predictions, but they're very specific, and it sucks, basically. He's a con artist, basically, at the school. Kokurano is, he's a liar. And they say it's like, oh, well, like, they feel an earthquake. It's like, I predicted an earthquake. And it's like, well, you just have a bunch of generic sayings in your cloak, They also say it's like, oh, he predicted someone's house would burn, and then 3 days later it did. It's like, well, then he went and burned that house, obviously. And he starts to have problem with Yugi, and he says, oh, well, you will be attacked by countless letters. Yugi ends up in the library, and he actually pushes bookshelves, and that's how Yugi figures it out. And there's this one panel, where basically, the bookshelves start falling, and this is when Dark Yugi comes out. But the weird thing is, when they do that, it just basically cuts, from the bookshelves falling, he's Dark Yugi, and then he's just standing there as the bookshelves have already fallen. So it really doesn't even look like he got out of the way, but just sort of, powerhoused it around them, and they just do not affect him at all, So I just thought that was interesting. Also, this high school student has chloroform. Not sure where that came from. But we get Shadow Game number 5, which actually involves the chloroform, which is putting the chloroform on a bunch of pieces of paper. And what you have to do is violently take the paper out without the chloroform bottle falling. And obviously, Kokurano does yank it, and it falls, basically. And he's knocked out by the chloroform. And because he's knocked out, he basically, all the predictions that he had are out in the open, and Yugi says, well, you'll be out, till tomorrow, so clearly everyone will see how you're a fake. This is actually the first time there's no penalty game. Now, granted, last chapter is like, well, what's the penalty game? Burning to death. This one he lets him off easy, so yeah. The game was kind of interesting, but this whole thing, is like, oh, this, I don't know, this is probably one of the better ones we've had so far. Chapter 6 is called Into the Fire, where basically we're gearing up for the school festival. And let's see, we had a bunch of stuff, like, a bunch of ideas of what I believe Class B is the class that Yugi is in, the homeroom class. So Class B, they have a bunch of ideas, fried noodles and stuff, but Yugi comes up with carnival games, and they end up going with that. And then... okay, so they get this spot, this like prime real estate spot to have their carnival games, but an upperclassman comes in, forcibly takes their spot for his giant grill because he and his buddies like to grill cabbage pancakes. And they are very aggressive about how they grill. So, yeah. It was very, very odd. And then, they use the grill as a battering ram to destroy the carnival games. And then they actually do hit Yugi. And then the spirit comes out. And interesting note I put here, would anyone just say no to the spirit? Because the spirit, every time Dark Yugi comes out, he always shows up and is like, oh, well, now we have to play a game, you know? And everyone's like, a game? Okay, I'll take on your game. It's like, what if someone just said no? It's like, no, I'm not going to play a game. Get out of here, you know? It's like, why don't I just beat you up? That's the game. But they actually do, there are later chapters where it's like, well, why do that? We can just beat you up. But the game goes on anyway, basically, and then they lose it. So Shadow Game number 6 is Griddle Ice Hockey. And that's exactly what Dark Yugi says. It's Griddle Ice Hockey, where they have ice, and on it is a test tube with explosives, like explosive chemicals, and they're basically playing ice hockey, going across the grill, which has already been heated up, and if basically you're just trying to keep it away from you before it explodes. But the guy goes way too hard on it, and he hits it, and it breaks, and it explodes in his face. So, yeah, I wrote down penalty game number 6, literally exploding. And then that's the chapter. So another interesting one. Again, it's a game, but it's kind of weird, you know? Chapter 7 is called The Face of Truth. Hondo is a character. Hey, Honda, not Hondo. Not Hondo Onaka, although that would be really, really fun. But Honda is a character now. Basically, he wants to romance Miho, or Ribbon, as she's also known. He asks Jonochi, and then Jonochi asks Yugi, hey, how can we, do something romantic for her? And then they go to the game store, and that's where Grandpa basically says, oh, you should have a blank puzzle, write out a love letter, and then as she puts the pieces together, she will be able to read it. Which is strange, but okay. You're really banking on the fact that she likes puzzles. Like, I don't think I would like that. Like, I'm not really a puzzle guy. I'm very impatient, so I probably would not have gotten behind that, like they're banking on with Miho. So, the villain of this one, because for a few pages I was like, is there actually going to be a villain in this one? But sure enough, there is. Miss Kono, I believe is her name. She has some weird dating thing, and she is like very, very tough, and then she realizes that Miho has this puzzle and is ready to expel, because apparently dating is also not good. Yeah, no dating, no jobs, that's what I wrote down. Dating is also against the rules at this school. School's very strict, apparently. She starts to figure out, she's like, okay, who is the one that, made this puzzle? Honda's about to step up, but then Yugi steps up, then Jonochi stands up, then Honda stands up, and they try to figure it out, but then they realize that Honda obviously signed the puzzle, so they have to put it together. And then this is apparently enough for Dark Yugi to show up, and then it's not even a shadow game. He just makes her face into a puzzle, and so like her makeup will like pop off like a puzzle. Yeah, it was kind of a weird one, but hey, Honda's a friend now. He's part of the group, so there's that. Chapter 8 is called The Poison Man. This one was dumb as hell. So there's a shoe guy. Okay, so he has very expensive shoes that Jonochi wants. And he says, look, I'll put a scorpion in here, and if you put the shoe on with the scorpion, then you're good. He does it. Jonochi does it. He takes the challenge, and he wins. It wasn't an actual scorpion. I think, I'm not entirely positive about that, but I think it wasn't. And then the guy basically hires people. So this guy does not get paid for the shoes, which he said are like 100,000 yen or something. Like or maybe even 1 million. Like they're very, very expensive shoes. And so he doesn't get paid for them, but instead, Jonochi just takes this little test and he passes. So he takes the shoes, and then he hires 3 guys, and I think they said it's like 3,000 yen a piece. So they said it's not very much. 3,000 yen barely covers, expenses at the arcade. But they go and beat up Jonochi, take the shoes back, and give it back to him. But this guy's not making any money. Hey, I just wanted to make a quick little note here. So while I was editing this video, putting it all together, I actually realized there is a panel that says how the guy makes money. Essentially, After Jonochi puts his foot in with the fake scorpion, the guy gives it to him for half price, so instead of 100,000 yen, it's about 50,000 yen. So technically he is making money, but he's still paying 9,000 yen to have guys beat up whoever buys the shoe. So I just wanted to make that a little note. It does help, although this is still kind of a weird, sort of dumb chapter, but still, okay, at least there is that explanation. So just wanted to put that in here real quick. That was very, very weird. There's like, this guy's not making any money, so what's the point? I don't know. But the shadow game is basically, they put a bunch of coins in, Dark Yugi puts a bunch of coins in the shoe, and the scorpion is alive? I don't know. I don't think it was a real scorpion at the beginning, though. And then they have to basically take out coins without getting stung by the scorpion, and then the guy tries to stab the scorpion, but he misses, and so he gets hit with the sting, and then it's like, oh, he's been taken to the hospital, and here's the sneakers, Jonochi. It just has a hole in one of them because they stabbed it, but yeah. Chapter 9 is the Cards with Teeth Part 1, our first two-parter of this, and we have Magic and Wizards, otherwise known as Duel Monsters, the great game that will later dominate the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh! And we also get Grandpa's most prized card, the Blue Eyes White Dragon. I was going to have my Blue Eyes White Dragon here for this video, but I don't remember where I put that deck specifically. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't know where my Blue Eyes deck is right now, so yeah, that's unfortunate. But yeah, we do have the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and we also have Kaiba from class, which is interesting. He just sort of shows up and is like, "Oh, you're Kaiba from class. Like, you haven't been in the previous 8 chapters, but you're Kaiba from class, right?" So yeah. And apparently at this point, Kaiba doesn't have a single Blue Eyes White Dragon. But he does steal the Blue Eyes, and we have Shadow Game number 9, The First Duel, where basically... So here's the interesting thing. This is the first game. Like, this isn't one of those, let's stab our hands sort of things. Like, this is a game, which is really interesting. But yeah, so for this Shadow Game, the only difference is it's a normal duel, basically, and they do go over pretty well how to play the game. But the difference is that the monsters are real. But that doesn't really do anything. Like, the monsters are real, but they don't, like, hurt the opponent or anything. Like, no, there's just real monsters. Like, oh, okay. Monsters? Real monsters? And it's like, okay, that's just that. Chapter 10 is the Cards with Teeth Part 2. So I wrote down, danger really is only in the penalty. Yugi still has to win. And this is the first time where we really get Dark Yugi basically... Well, I mean, there are a couple times where, like, Dark Yugi's like, oh, geez, it's a good thing that I didn't get stung by the scorpion or anything. But yeah, it's like, even though he has brought these monsters to life, it doesn't really do anything for either of them. He still has to beat Kaiba. So, yeah. But honestly, it's a very good introduction to... it's a very good introduction to Duel Monsters. So I really do like it. We also get Meme Lord himself, the Skull Servant. There are no trap cards. It seems to just be monsters and spells. Which is ironic that... because if you follow the card game at all now, almost no one uses trap cards anymore. So I actually thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, when it first started in the manga, no trap cards, So anyway, Yugi's most powerful card was the Summoned Skull. He does not have the Dark Magician at this point. We do have like the 20% increases, which I only wrote that down because it's infuriating. I'm actually rewatching Duelist Kingdom right now, and there's a lot of moments like that where it's like, oh my gosh, why do you have to do this? Why do you have to have like percentage increases? It makes such weird numbers for attack and defense, Kaiba. So basically, how Kaiba loses is that he sneaks in the Blue Eyes. He actually didn't put it in his deck, but he sneaks it into his deck. Like pocket aces basically. And the Spirit knows this, so when he does summon Blue Eyes doesn't respond to him in any way, and instead he just sort of melts away because he just can't exist because he's not actually Kaiba's card. And then Yugi actually uses Monster Reborn to bring back the Blue Eyes, which is interesting. So Yugi originally wins with Blue Eyes, which is interesting. For being like the rival card, like every rival is judged by Kaiba and his Blue Eyes. Honestly, it really is not Kaiba's Blue Eyes in this original duel. The penalty game is Yugi puts Kaiba in a card, basically, which is sort of, what is used a lot like in Duelist Kingdom or something, but it's Yugi who first does it, and he gives Kaiba the illusion of death, basically, which is interesting. So he gives Kaiba the illusion of death, but he does say, oh, well, this is a nightmare. It will wear off at some point. And he says, look, maybe someday you will figure out how to properly use monsters, and you will understand the heart of the cards. And so I wrote that down in all caps, like, oh, he said the thing, the heart of the cards, So this one, honestly, best we've had so far. So I really did like this. Next up, we have The Wild Gang Part 1 and Part 2. This one I barely wrote down much because it was just kind of there. This is one of those, like, I didn't really think needed to be a two-parter. So Jonochi has joined up with the Rintama gang, and he's basically doing it under protest because the main guy, Hirutani, is basically like, look, you will join the gang or we'll beat up your friends. So Jonochi does it under protest. This brings us to part 2, where there's a torture chamber because he does try to beat one of them up for previously attacking Yugi. But they have tasers. Somehow Yugi is able to find Jonochi through the Millennium Site in the Millennium Puzzle. Not sure how that works. Shadow game number 10. So basically, Yugi and everyone is drenched in water, and they need to find out the switch of a bomb that Yugi has planted, and they realize that it's their tasers, and so they're like, oh, well, it's our tasers, we just won't use our tasers, we'll just beat you up. But what they don't realize is that that one of the guys was knocked out. Yugi actually got him wet and put his arm with a taser and had it to where if he starts moving, it will fall and ignite pretty much everyone but Yugi because he grounded himself. And then that's exactly what happens, and the day is saved. Okay, Chapter 13. This is where we get our first story arc, actually. More than just a two-parter. This is The Man from Egypt Part 1. So basically, we have a museum opening with an archaeological exhibit about Egypt, which is very interesting. So, getting to one of the big things with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Egypt. Obviously, the Millennium Puzzle is from Egypt. And so Yugi and the gang want to head out to the museum, which is very interesting. They meet up with a guy called Kanekura. Excuse me if I butcher all these names, by the way. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but that's okay. Kanekura, who's very clearly evil, and he wants to basically sell the Millennium Puzzle for a fortune. So Yugi is actually separated from the puzzle for a little bit, and then we get our new main character, and kind of, honestly, for a little bit, our main antagonist, Shadi, who will go on to also be in the Duelist Kingdom anime, but he is here basically to... he's basically here because these archaeologists have defiled, the domain of the gods and everything. So he is gone to punish them, basically. And very interesting interactions. First off, he's using 2 Millennium items. He has the Millennium Key and the Millennium Scales. The Millennium Scales are actually being used for something. Because if you know the anime, the Millennium Scales are the least used Millennium items of them all. But still, Shadi is using them here. And there's an interesting interaction with Yugi originally where Shadi is actually crying, And Yugi's like, well, why are you crying? And he said, these are not my tears. These are the tears of this pharaoh, this mummy that has been dug up, because he is now stuck here, basically. He cannot, I don't remember quite what it was, but he can't, move on, basically. He is stuck here where he should not be. He cannot rest. So that was a very interesting thing. Shadi kills a dude. He just straight up kills a dude. And he uses the Millennium Scales, basically, like the scales of, I believe the scales of Osiris in ancient Egyptian mythology, where basically they put a feather on one side of the scales, and on the other side of the scales is your sins, and basically, or your soul, basically, and your soul needs to not tip the scales, and if you hit the floor, you're done, basically. So that is kind of a penalty game, actually, but still sort of Shadi's shadow game, which is very interesting. And it looks into the soul, and the guy Kanekura, I believe Shadi asked him some questions, and through his answers, even some of them where he thinks he's telling the truth, it weighs down his soul compared to the feather. And so we get the penalty game for this, which at first looks like a crocodile chair, but it's Amit. I believe that's how you pronounce that. We'll see. And so basically, this creature has devoured the soul of Kanekura. That's when Yugi shows up and Shadi issues his challenge, which is where we get The Man from Egypt Part 2 on Chapter 14. So for this challenge, basically, Shadi uses the Millennium Key to enter Yugi's soul, because normally there's always a room of the soul, but when he goes into Yugi's soul, he realizes that there's two rooms. Which is very classic. They remake this scene basically in Duelist Kingdom as well, where basically on one side of the hallway is a child's room, basically, and that's Yugi's room. On the other side is a much darker room, and that's where the spirit lives, the other Yugi. So it's very interesting, and Shadi, he sees this like, this isn't right. No one ever has two rooms in their soul. And so, yeah, he actually technically fails the challenge because Shadi goes through and he has to find the actual room where the spirit is, but he actually can't do it. So he can't figure it out, and then he has to basically leave. And he wants to figure out the power of the Millennium Puzzle, which leads us into Chapter 15, The Other Criminal. Because the other criminal, the other person who defiled these ancient Egyptian, artifacts and tombs and stuff, is Professor Yoshimori. So he goes into his soul room and finds a room of obsession. And so then he decides that he can use the professor to his advantage in order to draw out the other Yugi and learn his power in the real world. So he uses marionette design, which is interesting, which allows him to reshape a person's room and allow them to be put under Shadi's control, which is where we get stage 2, which is basically just trying to draw out the spirit, draw out Dark Yugi, and he has Professor Yoshimori basically tried to kill Jonochi. This brings us into Chapter 16. We are going to be rushing through some of these as well. This one I actually didn't take too many notes on. So they realize that strangling Jonochi is not enough. And so then Shadi goes into the soul of Taya, redecorates it to make her a doll, as opposed to a mindless zombie, and basically puts her in danger. To where now they can start a game, basically, which actually leads us into Chapter 17, Game Start. So for this one, this is the Trial of the Mind, which actually this arc is generally referred to as the Trial of the Mind. Oh, look, I'm really trying to get through this. I was really hoping we could power through this faster, but that's okay. There was a lot to cover. What can I say? So for this one, Anzu, and I don't know if I've been saying Taya or not, but Anzu is basically tied at the end of a plank, and she's being held by four different things called Ushebti. That might be how you pronounce that. I'm not really sure. But basically they are pieces kind of Yugi's heart, and if he shows any weakness, they'll break, and eventually if they all break, then she falls over and dies, basically. So the goal is to break Shadi's Ushebti, and then that will release the Millennium Key, which will, once that goes down and touches Anzu, she will be freed, basically. It will put her back to the way she was. And so we get the first challenge: what creeps on the ground and clings to the pillars? The answer being shadows, which I got wrong. I said it was spiders, but no, it is a shadow. So I would have failed. Oh well. Chapter 18 is the second stage, where basically the ground starts to split apart. There's something under there, and I think, oh my gosh, it's the Macra. No, it's Amit. He's back. So, yeah. This shadow game is concentration or death. This one was kind of weird. We had basically 9 plates that were turned over, and you had to guess the picture on the middle. But you weren't allowed to see it, and then and you just had to guess it. The only hint was that it was a mirror, basically. It was a mirror of Amit. So Yugi realized, okay, what does he have one of? And he realizes Amit has one mouth, so he wins that one. Chapter 19. Yeah, just sort of rushing through a couple of these. Chapter 19, the final stage. So basically, Shadi brings back a different version of Jonochi, actually. The bully version of Jonochi from Chapter 1. And so this becomes a game of death between Yugi and Jonochi, where basically they are standing on these specific squares, and they are going to toss the Millennium Puzzle, and however it lands, whichever way it's pointed, they have to walk 2 steps, basically. And if you go far enough, one of them basically will fall into a bottomless pit and end up dying. However, Yugi passes all of his turns. He passes all of his turns. Jonochi takes his turns and gets Yugi right up to the edge, but he keeps passing to Shadi's surprise. And basically, Jonochi stops. Is like, no, I will not do this now. And that is when they realize that Yugi trusts his friends. Even if this is a different version of his friend, he is still his friend, and he trusts him. And Yugi's trust rewards him, and the two of them basically stop the game. Which leads us into Chapter 20, Game Over. So, this act of trust and friendship breaks Shadi's Ushebti and saves both Anzu as well as the professor, because they do get the key to him, and he is basically fixed. And basically, Yugi says that is the true power of the Millennium Puzzle. The power of unity. The power of friendship. Which is pretty interesting. And so, yeah, Shadi admits defeat. Like, okay, fair enough. You beat me fair and square. You're the only person to ever beat me. You are worthy of the Millennium Puzzle and its power. Because that's the thing, is that this is the first time in 3,000 years that the Millennium Puzzle has ever been solved. So the Millennium Puzzle chose Yugi. And Shadi leaves basically saying, perhaps you might be able to open that door, which sort of gives us a little mystery. And he goes and he'll say, we will meet again. And that's Chapter 20. That is the Man from Egypt Trial of the Mind arc. Which was very interesting. Now, some of the chapters we had for this, for instance, Chapter 16, were more chapters that moved pieces along. Even though it starts off as like, oh, the Man from Egypt Part 1 and Part 2, it is a continuing story from Chapter 13 to Chapter 20. And it's really, really good and really interesting. So I really, really like that, and I also especially loved the two-parter with Kaiba, mainly because I just love, bringing in dual monsters and everything, and that, feels like classic Yu-Gi-Oh! So those were really, really good. Now the rest of the chapters, the sort of slice-of-life school chapters, they were good, but they weren't as good. They were a bit goofier, and some of the shadow games were kind of silly, but overall I did really enjoy them. And these 20 chapters were very, very interesting and really good arc to sort of close us out on our first read through. So yeah, a lot of very interesting stuff in this one, and I really, really enjoyed it. I do also have just a couple other things, like, you know, things I would want to talk about in a book review. And so we can just sort of power through them very quickly. The main thing I wanted to talk about was the story. But the main characters are all interesting. They are pretty... They're very consistent with what I know in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, with the only exceptions really being, like, you know, maybe Jonochi is a bit more prone to violence, but, you know, he's always there to, you know, look out for his buddy, you know? So, yeah, the main interesting thing I felt like was Shadi, actually, because Shadi, he was always sort of a background character in the original anime. Well, maybe I shouldn't say the original anime because it's the original manga, but you know what I mean. But in the anime, he was always sort of a background character who showed up every so often to just sort of give maybe a little exposition and stuff and be a little mysterious, and that was it. Having him basically be the villain of, you know, the antagonist of this 7-chapter arc was very, very interesting. I really, really enjoyed that, actually. So, it did a lot for Shadi as a character, so I really, really enjoyed that. But other than that, I mean, everyone is pretty consistent with how they are in the anime. So I really, really enjoyed that. And as for other stuff, I mean, I guess we could, you know, slightly talk about the art. It is interesting. You know, some of the designs are a little off from what I'm used to in the anime, but for the most part, I mean, they're still really, really good. I do love every time, you know, basically at the beginning of every chapter, you know, they have this big sort of, I don't want to say like mural, but this big, you know, almost poster shot basically at the beginning of every chapter. And I always look forward to seeing those. And it's always interesting to see sort of, you know, the expressions on everyone. Like, everyone has these, you know, sort of crazier expressions and stuff. And actually the expressions on Yugi, especially when he turns to Dark Yugi, are very interesting because they are a lot more sinister and sort of scary, you know, which if you've only seen the anime, you're not really used to that because, you know, Yami Yugi shows up and he's, you know, all stoic and stuff. But this time, you know, especially like in the earlier chapters, he shows up and he's all like, you know, creepy, like, all right, let's play a game, you know? So I really do like that. And then, you know, some of the deaths actually are very interesting, how they're drawn and stuff. Or something like Amit is very interesting. You know, this giant crocodile thing just shows up and is about to eat you, you know? So I really do like that. And then minor criticisms. I mean, again, just sort of strange opening chapters, you know, like some of the games, some of the shadow games originally are kind of weird. It's like, let's stab our hands and here's a scorpion. And then definitely... but some of them are very, very interesting. You know, even the ones like, let's, you know, play griddled ice hockey and stuff. But then you get stuff like, okay, the karaoke, you know, the bad singer is just sort of weird. You know, this aggressive bad singer, or the guy who's very adamant about his grilling and stuff. Like, okay, like you're really gonna beat people up because you want to grill cabbage pancakes? Really? Like, it's kind of goofy, but it is, like, the way it's played seriously, but that kind of makes it funnier, you know? But the worst one, I would say, the worst villain is the shoe guy, because he just doesn't make any sense, you know? It's like, I don't get paid, and instead I'm paying about 9,000 yen to get stuff back that I already have. Like, what is the purpose here? Maybe I missed something. Maybe you guys can tell me if I missed something, but it just seemed very, very dumb. But after that, it's all really, really good. The only maybe sort of lull after that, you know, because we get, right after that is with Kaiba, which is good. The Wild Gang, it's okay. It didn't really need to be a two-parter, but it was still pretty decent. And then after that is when we get into Shadi, which is very, very cool. So yeah. overall, really, really good. I had a blast reading these. Hopefully, you guys have read these as well, and you had a blast as well. And I hope you had a blast with this review. Hopefully, they won't be so super long in the future, but we'll have to see. But yeah, that is basically it. Tune back in. I don't know if I'm going to be doing these 1 a week or 2 a week. I still have to decide that, but we'll be back next time for chapters 21 through 40, which will cover the Death Tea arc, I believe. So yeah, that is basically it. With all that being said, I'm Alex from 7th Hour Films, and I will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of my reviews of manga and stuff, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.